as a queer Palestinian, I've been repeatedly told that I don't exist. If there's any questions about that, feel free to poke me. I do in fact exist. So I want to start by just, I wanted to share the dictionary.com definition of pinkwashing, because when you Google pinkwashing, this is like the first definition that comes up. So they say it's a critical term used to refer to the practice of attempting to benefit for purported support for LGBTQ+ rights, often as a way to profit or to distract from a separate agenda. And that's kind of a broad statement. So I'm Palestinian, so I'm specifically going to be talking about Israeli pinkwashing. And how that relates to my people is that Israel benefits from this image that they perpetuate of supposedly having this golden, great record on LGBTQ rights that is not only untrue, this record does not exist, but it also harms all Palestinians, including queer Palestinians, of course, and Palestinians regardless of where they are in the homeland or in diaspora. Pinkwashing is harmful to all of us. And so I included a couple of examples of what Israeli pinkwashing looks like in the way it's used. These are not all-encompassing examples. There are many, many more, but these are just some of the big ones that I see. So one of the myths that Israel wants to perpetuate is that all Palestinians are homophobic, there are no queer people in Palestine, and they use that as a means of saying how progressive Israel is. And this is not even scientifically true. We know that queer people exist in every single population on Earth, regardless of location or other identity, and they always have. And practically speaking, it's a lot easier to murder people who don't exist, right? Because who's gonna look for them? Who but other Palestinians would know that they are there? So you can see how this pinkwashing feeds into the genocide that we're seeing in Gaza today. And also, it's this idea that all Palestinians are homophobic, or that Palestinian culture and society is homophobic. This does nothing for the global queer community. It does nothing for queer Palestinians, does nothing for Palestinians as a whole. There's no way, despite Israel wanting people to believe that they're so great and have this gold star record on gay rights, this myth that says there are no queer people here, this does nothing for the queer community. Nothing about it is a positive. And I wanted to include this as well because this Queering the Map is a community project where people got the API from Google Maps and made it so you can submit anonymous comments, and so nobody's name's on there. They don't even post the dates of when people uploaded things, but you tag your location and you can put anonymous comments, and these are just two of many, many more on Queering the Map. But the first one I thought was particularly heartbreaking. And then the second one I wanted to include because I love that they said, I thought everyone is gay to some level. And it's how different is that than the queer community here? How different is that than the queer community, literally anywhere? And if you didn't know that these comments, particularly the second one, were from Gaza, you would think it was queer people in Columbus, saying that. Because again, there are queer people everywhere. And I particularly wanted to include the first one because it's heartbreaking, not just because, of how supposedly homophobic Gaza is, but because the terror inflicted by Israel is why this person's partner and their love was ripped away, not because of supposedly homophobic Palestinian society. I also wanted to add some context because the first one is tagged Jabalia, which is a refugee camp. So these people have already been displaced, already been exiled. That's why they're in the refugee camp. And then since October 2023, Israel has repeatedly targeted the same refugee camp. So the people there have been, displaced multiple times, targeted multiple times. Okay, another example is when the settlers and occupiers accept queer people in a limited capacity, but only insofar that it serves their empire and their goals toward imperialism and colonialism. So for example, Israel loves to say like, oh, we let gay people in our military. Like, we have a ton of gay people in the military. Well, number one, that's not progressive, because they're, like, just because a queer person pushes the button to bomb a place, that is not queer progress. That is not good for any queer community, especially not the queer Palestinian community. And second, they require military service for all of their people. So it's not like they intentionally made this decision to let queer people in their military. They just require it for everyone. So it's kind of like inclusive by default. Meanwhile, while they love to share that they're gay soldiers in the IDF, they neglect to share that gay marriage is, for example, is not legal in Israel. And they could very easily, grant marriage equality to everyone, but gay marriage, does not serve the empire. So it's very selectively inclusive. They're selectively sharing what messages they want. And in every area that they claim to be inclusive, it's always in the name of colonialism. Another example is they love to say like, oh, we have pride parades in Israel. We have all these celebrations and these like queer affirming spaces and whatnot, but while also saying like, well, you don't see that stuff in Palestine, so those people are backwards, right? But think about just the practicality of trying to organize a pride parade. Okay, so you're gonna need to close off some streets. You need to like advertise it so people know it's happening. You need to like organize speakers, activities, music, all this stuff. How can you possibly do that when there are like armed guards everywhere, when there are border walls, when there are checkpoints, when they have a massive permitting system where you have to apply for a permit to do basically anything, including have a job, including any kind of travel, much less like a mass event. And if Israel says that there are no queer Palestinians, why on earth are they gonna grant a permit for you to have a pride parade? Because that goes against the narrative that they're trying to push, right? And this says nothing of just the material conditions of daily life in Palestine. Like, people are just trying to survive and take care of their families. Like, having a parade is a privilege, frankly. And having a parade is not a matter of survival. Like, it's affirming, yes, we love to see it, yes. But the material conditions make it really, really difficult to do things like that. Not because Palestinian society is homophobic, but because of all the limitations placed on Palestinian society by Israel. Another example, and you see this a lot with the online trolls, they'll say, go try being trans in Palestine. And they will also, so that's on like the more benign end, which yes, that is still harmful, but to the more extreme and definitely harmful end is there is a well-documented history of Israel finding queer people who are in more conservative parts of Palestinian communities or more conservative families, and then threatening to out them to their family, their religious community, unless they become informants. And I'll get to like some more information about that in a second. But we know that outing people is bad. We don't do that. Not outing someone is queer etiquette 101. So what could possibly be progressive about using someone's queer identity against them. Like there's a history of like queer IDF soldiers like getting on things like Grindr and like baiting queer Palestinians into like matching with them, for example, and then using that information against them. And also, it's hard being trans in Ohio. It's hard being trans in the US. I mean, think about all the anti-trans laws, bathroom bills that they're, you know, constantly passing and trying to push through the halls of government. But nobody is saying like, oh, go try, you know, being trans in America. You know, so, and yet, as we all know, like the folks here are a testament, there are absolutely trans people in Ohio. And it's like you find community, you know, do mutual aid, you find your people, and you do your best to thrive. What would make someone think that queer people and trans people in Palestine are not doing the same thing, if not anti-Arab racism? And I do want to say too, that a lot of people who are Zionists love to throw out like, oh, well, there are anti-gay laws on the books in Palestine. While that is true, that is missing some important context. One, the like law that it criminalizes homosexuality was put on the books in 1936 during the British Mandate. So the British occupiers came to Palestine and brought their homophobic rules and laws with them. Those did not exist before colonization. And two, there is little to no evidence that these laws have been enforced. Like, people just don't care. And if you want to get technical, there are tons of anti-gay, not to mention anti-black, you know, all these other laws on the books here in the US that are still on the books, but no one cares to enforce them because we as a society have accepted, for the most part, that like this stuff is wrong. And if it does try to get enforced, it's like looked down upon, you know, and like people are outraged. It's like, how is this still on the books? And so that's why you see every so often, you know, them trying to like say amend the Constitution to a state that still has some really terrible and offensive language and laws on the books. I realize I'm talking long, so I'll try to wrap up soon. And so I've been sharing more like documented examples, happy to share my sources with anyone and the slides with anyone who would like. But I also want to say some things like just myself as a queer Palestinian. I believe that in the same way that there are queer people in every population on the planet, there are also homophobes in a lot of populations on the planet. And a lot of that comes from colonialism and like Western folks pushing their ideas on indigenous and marginalized populations. And I have never seen anything like truly and inherently homophobic or transphobic in Palestinian culture. And of course, I can only speak for myself. I don't want to speak for Palestinians as a whole, nor should I, because BIPOC folks are constantly asked to speak on behalf of the population as a whole, right? And we know that that's problematic. So I can only speak for myself, but I have never, not once, experienced homophobia from another Palestinian person. That's just me. And every experience of homophobia that I've ever had has come from someone who benefits from the upholding of empire. I also want to shout out some Palestinians that I think you should read. And these are all queer Palestinians. In particular, I want to shout out Syed Atshan, who is the author of Queer Palestine and the Empire of Critique. He, when I was talking about like how IDF soldiers will like bait queer Palestinians into becoming informants, he wrote about that extensively in his book. It's more of an academic text, so if you really want some like deep dive into facts and policy and things like that, I recommend that book in particular. All the others are more creative, so Rana Jarrar, I recommend her memoir, Love is an Ex-Country. She also wrote 2 novels that are really good. George Abraham is a poet. He wrote Birthright and is also the editor-in-chief at Misna magazine, which is an Arab forward magazine, that they actually did a Palestine issue in 2019 that is excellent, and of course still extremely relevant. So I highly recommend downloading that off their website. Fargo Tabaki is another queer Palestinian. He has written so many things, like across multiple genres, and so no book yet, but definitely check the website, because he's got plays, poems, sci-fi stuff, and much of it is about being queer and Palestinian. Zaina Arafat is author of the novel You Exist Too Much, and there's a lot of talk of like being a first-generation Palestinian immigrant and trying to find queer community as like an immigrant Arab. And then Mick Siafa, poet, author of Blood Orange, also the editor of, it's called Inara, Light of Utopia. It is a anthology of all queer and trans Palestinians. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I hope you enjoyed this very brief rundown. I tried to give as much detail as I could in a limited time. But yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and